All right, guys, we are done talking about RAID. Hold on, let me make sure it's sharing the right screen. No, it's not. I don't want to look at my face. There we go. I was wondering why it looks so weird. Sorry about that. Okay. Hardware continued. This are the physical guts of a server. This is a Dell server. It's a Dell PowerEdge, either 560 or something. I have a picture of the front, just not in this one. This is one they had on a table in one of the cybersecurity labs that isn't being used. So I kind of took the liberty of taking it apart for you guys. I know the pictures aren't that big, which I apologize. Can't make all three of them fit. This is the top. This is the back of it. Just want to show you the connectors, and this is the power. Anyways, in here, this is a dual core machine, as in, no, it's just not two cores. It's two processor cores. That's what I mean by dual core. This is a Xeon processor here and a Xeon processor here. This right here is a SATA drive. I don't remember the size of it. I couldn't take apart that much of it. But this is all memory here. These are all 8 gig sticks. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 32 bits already. 2, 3, 4, 64. 1, 2, 3. Bad math. 32 and 32 and 64. 64 is going to be what? 128 gigs of memory? That's ludicrous. But that's a server. They need all the, horsepower. These, I believe, are fans or connectors for power. I forget what they are. You click them on and off. Oh, they're not fans. They're, that's right. They're just power connectors for the board and everything here, all in one. They try to make it as compact as possible. It's a rack server. Remember, it's on a rack server. So on the back of it, you have your network jack here. That is actually a serial port, and that's video out. I know, VGA in this day and age on a server. Who would have thought? Servers are kind of slow to change because normally when you set one of these guys up, you get up to your network and you give it a static IP. Remember, we did that? Then you remote into it. Remember, I had to do that from your home computer server, your virtual server. That's why you kind of don't need to update that to HDMI, DVI, or what have you. Alternative network ports back here for more of the configurations. This is more used for voice over IP, but I'm not gonna get into that animal. And this is the power supply. It's 750 watts. If you need to expand it, that's what this is for. Plug in another one, plug it into the board, ready to go. Does this guy have SCSI? Yeah, actually he does. I'm sorry. That's what those connectors are. It took me a while to remember because I haven't really popped one of these apart in a while. But they're pretty easy to work on. They're not that hard. They're just really flat, like Kansas flat. That's a lot of stuff sticking out of it. But so you got a blade server. That's cool. Or rack server. That's cool. But what's it look like before you even put it together? That's what we're going to talk about in the next slide. This is a rack with just a network switch on it. It's a 48 port switch. It's an old switch. I'm not using it. This was there. And this is what they look like without the casing, without the rack put in. Normally, this thing is usually the third thing you put in, or you could be the first, depending how you want to configure it. But normally, what you put in down here at the bottom is called an uninterrupted power supply. So those are essentially giant battery backups that are there and just charge and holding power in the event that you lose power. Because if you were to lose power, it can damage all your stuff, right? So let's say you do lose power at home, but your computer's on an uninterrupted power supply, UPS. Your computer's still going to be on. It could be on for an hour, it could be on for 3. It just depends on the size of your UPS. The ones I have in the next picture are about 8 hours each, so it gives you about 16 hours, but not going into it. My point of it, or rather my point of having a UPS is it gives you enough time to go there and turn off your machine so it doesn't get damaged. That's the whole point of a UPS. Yes, they fail. Yes, they get old and you replace them. It's part of maintenance, which we will get to when we talk about maintenance. So what does this look like after you kind of put it together? The pictures are kind of spread out. They're in a really weird angle where I took them. I couldn't get the best picture because it's literally in your face and there's a door behind you. Why they were set up that way, I don't know. But excuse me. This one here is one big rack like the one over there. And there's a UPS at the bottom. You see the doors open on the left. Then above that, about a foot above it, are the Dell servers right here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So these drives in there are all SCSI drives, like the orange connectors. That's what they plug into. To pop one out, you pop the tab off to the side, push the button in on the left, and then it unlocks it and pulls it out. And you just pop the new one in. Then you're off to the races. These are configured for, like I said, our cybersecurity lab over at Santa College. I don't have anything to do with it, unfortunately. But they made it a very big networking thing. Why? I have no idea, other than networking being the backbone of what you need to learn for server, cybersecurity, whatever have you. Yeah, it's very big, but the other part of it is identifying threats and all this other stuff, which I'm not going to get into. So they kind of skewed it to one side, which kind of made me confused, but that's not the point. Up there is network ports for just networking to it and connecting different ports, setting them up differently, and all that stuff. That's still there. Excuse me. There's a training exercise for the students that are, whenever they take that course, whenever they launch it off the ground. So we've covered hardware, we covered RAID, we covered the kind of hardware you need. You've seen the hardware as best as I could show you, which I don't know if is tangible in these pictures. But let's go on to troubleshooting. And I will tell you this right now. All of this is true. It's listed here. Server problems should generally be broken into a few categories. Hardware problems, yeah. Operating system configuration problems, yes. You can misconfigure something and screw something up and throw a wrench in it. And you scratch your head like, what did I do? What did I do? And then you kind of got to think about it and you figure it out. Application, service related problems, yes. Some applications don't play nice. Some do. Some services that Microsoft has built in don't play nice sometimes because they get conflicted. So it's important to determine which category your problem fits into. This is true because you can get a lot of different kinds of problems that look similar, and that's the issue. And that's what it's stating after that. What seems like an OS problem, stop errors, and unexpected reboots. So if your machine locks up or it just restarts randomly, you're going to think it's RAM, you're going to think it's the memory, you're going to think it's the CPU, you're going to think it's anything under the sun, right? But usually you got to start from the most basic idea. Is it plugged in? Is it getting enough power? Is it a cable loose? You got to go with the easy stuff first. You kind of form a checklist. Over time, you guys get better at troubleshooting. Don't worry, you're not going to know all of this, off the top of your heads. It takes a while for this to become second nature. And what I'm saying is at this point, yes, stop errors or unexpected errors, yes, that is a symptom of faulty memory or dying power supply. Yes, that is true. 9 times out of 10, memory doesn't die that often. Believe it or not, it's pretty rare for memory stick to be bad. Usually what goes bad is the slot the memory goes in. Those go bad before the memory. When the memory does go bad, you don't get stop errors. And you don't get unexpected reboots. No. You get a lot of blue screens. A lot. And I mean a ton. Excuse me. All the errors you get for blue screens. I'm so sorry, guys. It's been a rough day. All the errors that you get for blue screens are random. That's how you know it's random access memory. They're just different errors. Like IRQ and all this are equal. Boot underscore record not found. Was it on dial sys.64? And you're like, what the hell, man? That's nowhere related to each other. Any of those 3 errors are not even close. At that point, it's either the memory, the slot. The symptom of a dying power supply, and this is just for regular computers and it applies to servers, is it will reboot or it will take forever to get power to turn on. You press the power button, it tries to turn on, to turn on. Press the power and tries to turn on. It'll keep doing that. Or it'll cycle. It'll power, shut down. Power, shut down. That's more common than stop errors. Stop errors are not common with power issues from what I personally have seen. Just take it with a grain of salt. It's just from experience. God, I can actually talk about something. Look at me. I feel special. So this slide carries over again. I just cloned it because I added this. See? Remember, we said it could be hardware, operating system, application. That's what I'm talking about. You're gonna be like, what the heck? You're gonna be like, what the heck? And sometimes it is best to just walk away. I'm probably gonna delete the previous slide because it didn't have the picture. So it'll be about 38 slides, not 39. Count your lucky stars by the time you see this. So I'm not gonna go over this. This is essentially what it's like when you get caught with an error and you're like, oh, it just happened in front of you. I don't know what's going on. You got to decipher it. So this is where I was talking about the checklist. And a checklist is not in the sense of, oh, it's ingrained in my memory. It's just things you see, things you've been through. You kind of get a feel for all of this as you work in the field. I don't expect you guys to be masters at this, so don't freak out when I talk about it. So develop a standard server troubleshooting routine. Checklist. This is for servers though. To identify and correct server problems most efficiently, you should have a standard server troubleshooting procedure that you follow each time something goes wrong. So something went wrong. Let's start with power. Does it have power? Cool. Does it have video? Cool. Does it have network connection? Cool. Those check out rather. Go to the next thing. Troubleshooting server problems is generally more complicated than troubleshooting problems with client machines. This is true because operating systems is more complex and because all the services that run on a server machine. Yeah, that's true. It is a little more complex because you have to balance a bunch of different roles it does. Remember, your server can be a print server, a mail server, a voice over IP server. It's three things that are very complex to really troubleshoot. It can be a DNS server. It can be an FTP server that you guys have set up. So imagine all of those things went haywire and you don't know why. That's why I'm saying it's more complex. But the more you see these issues, the more you figure out how they function or don't function or where it hangs up. Remember when I was having Active Directory issues? Setting up the Active Directory and I was losing my mind. I spent a good, I don't know, what looks like 30, 40 minutes to you guys just troubleshooting it. And I did research on it and I stepped away and then I thought about it more. That's the kind of things you sometimes have to do. Most of these problems aren't solved overnight. Let's put it that way. They aren't solved in the first 15 minutes. That's usually the rule. If you can't solve it in 15 minutes, take a step back and look over everything you troubleshot and go from there. And I'll be very honest with you guys. With print servers, this is print servers in general. We've had it, and this is me talking about work, where I come in on a Monday, nobody, and I mean nobody offsite, on site, offsite is like a remote campus, downtown at the district office, at my site, nobody can print, all the printers are down. You know what it was? You really want to know what fixed it? What caused the issue? The print server was just stuck, as in it just tried to boot and it just kept in a boot loop. Want to know what fixed it? A higher level technician, way higher than me, walked over, hit the restart button, and then it came back to life and loaded Windows Server, whatever the version, 2019, 2022, R2 they're running. And that's all. For print servers, they're usually that simple. You don't really have to troubleshoot much in terms, well, not that you don't, but 9 times out of 10, a restart on a print server fixes the print server because print servers are pretty simple servers. They're not complex like an email server. A DNS server gets very complex starting into it. A DHCP server gets even more complex, which is why I didn't want to have you guys do it because you would have had to edit things in your home router, which I don't want you guys to mess with because I don't want you guys to break things for class. So, like I said, starting at the bottom, server troubleshooting, physical layer problems, everything you can physically touch, keyboard, mouse, monitors, power, network cable. The first step in troubleshooting server problems is to determine whether the physical layer is functioning properly. This includes the server's computer hardware, any attached peripherals, mouse, keyboard, screens if you have them, and cabling. Network cable, Lord, I am so sorry. Network cable, what's the other one? Made glass. Fiber optic cable. You have fiber optics sometimes. That's usually from ISPs. It comes out. So you have network cards or cables will help you identify whether the hardware is at fault. That's true. You can swap things around. For testing long runs of cable, so things are over anything over, what was it? 10 feet when it comes to net. No, that's a lie. Anything over 15 feet when it comes to networking goes through something that's called attenuation. So if you have a 50-foot cable, after 15 feet, the signal degrades. And when it degrades, it breaks down. You need to have something called a repeater in there. So you slap on a repeater, and hook up another cable, and you keep going. You make longer cables. If you have recently added a new hardware to the server, make sure that it's compatible. Yeah, that's pretty common. Yeah, see, for longer cables, telling you to use can be switched to use a cable tester or a multimeter. I don't have a cable tester on me, but essentially what it is, it's a spike with a speaker, and then it's long, you have a handle, you grab it, and you press it, and it makes a tone. When you put it to a server, or sorry, network cable with signal, it goes beep, 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 and that's the sound, literally, the sound of the data transferring past. If you put it to a cable that's broken, it was be like kind of when you are left on your phone and you try to hello, all you hear is dial tone. That's essentially what it sounds like. So that's how that works. Multimeter, I mean, you can. I don't know if it's a voltmeter, you just check voltage. Because they do carry a very low amount of voltage, but those have been replaced by cable testers and even link runners are what they're called in networking, where you plug a network cable, you can check it if it works. Plug it into a port, you can check it, make sure it all connects and it's all configured. And that's a whole different animal. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay. Moving on. So we're talking about how to troubleshoot the basics, how to check things. And yeah, sometimes adding hardware can be really weird because it could be certified, but the drivers could be out of date or the newest drivers break something. Usually drivers break something. That's the best way I can describe it. For example, this is as of today. I had a last week into today. Let's put it that way. We had an issue with the printer that's networked. And normally when they're networked, they have a generic driver. They don't have the PLC version 6 or user mode 4 driver, just a basic driver that lets it print. It's just a printer. That's why it's there. right? It's networked, people can share it, it's on the server. That's what the printer is for. So what wound up happening was this printer kept spitting out a bunch of random gobbledygook characters and just different things on just one line every time you told it to print something. It would just be on one line, and it kept spitting out pages of this stuff. What, 10, 15 pages every print job, and it's a 2-page print job. I guess it's printing out the equivalent of 2 pages and 15 pages. Data is just a mess. So we updated the driver on our end on the machine, so that the print it still did it again. Had them go back to the network server, rebuild what's called the queue for the printer, which I've showed you what the queue looks like on our area. And you click on it, you add it, that's a queue. And they rebuilt it, uploaded the latest driver, it still did it. So at that point, the server is not the issue. The driver is not the issue. Even the newest driver didn't fix it. So what rules out? That rules out the server. So we know the server's not broken, because everybody else can print to every other machine that they need to print to. The problem wound up being that inside a printer, you don't have what's called a motherboard. You have what's called a logic board. That board is starting to fail. So now they have to buy a new printer. That's why troubleshooting isn't as straightforward as it sounds. It isn't always going to be the main thing you think. It's always something completely different. So let's move on and get into the nitty-gritty of the deeper stuff a little bit. Okay. Traffic control. This is a networking server. Troubleshoot addressing and routing problems. You guys ran into this. See that public DNS down there should look familiar. That's Google's, and that's the alternative to Google. Remember I had you guys do that and you couldn't ping your servers for extra credit? That's why. Your DNS was way the heck over here. I'll use my water bottle. Your router is down here. Your computer is just this finger, or service pointing, or your computer's pointing here. Your router, your server's pointing way up here. And get something else. Sharpie. It's pointing to the Sharpie. And you're over here on the water bottle. They're not even close to each other, right? So that's why they couldn't talk. That's why you couldn't ping. So once you eliminate hardware as a suspect, you should check the operating system configuration, check your settings. The typical business network runs, I put business in terms of like where you work, on TCP/IP, and incorrect TCP/IP settings can result in addressing and routing problems. Yes, this is true. The 10.0.0 is a private IP. That's okay. It works. It doesn't matter. It's an IP address. Default gateway is 001. 10. I just did 10 because it's already in that server. But look at the subnet mask. 25.0.0.0. I'll tell you this right now. That ain't going to fly. There's no range in that kind of mask. What I mean by range, normally every IP like that .7 would have a range or IP subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Cool. And all of that up to octet. The ending it, the octet's a bit, let's say ranges to 99, would still have that same mask, 252525. So they could all see each other. But this is invalid because the minimum subnet mask is 2.255.255. So that second zero in the box broke everything for this server. That's what's saying to check that. That's a simple thing that when you're typing, sometimes you're looking at something and the configuration has to be this. You will get that a lot from people above you that will configure it. You kind of got to input it just to finish it. That's your job, let's say. Because networking team would handle all the network configuration, not you as a server admin. You don't really, you work on the network, but you don't handle most of the network. You know what I mean? So if people are in charge of all the networking, they will give you the configuration settings for the IP, because they have to configure what's called the port where it plugs into on the wall. They configure that, and that's how it gets the IP. So you'll know it's static. You'll set it to that, which is the top one. Remember how you guys said the static one? That's what you did there. Subnet mask, they will give you it for whatever your network is set to. That will go in there. And gateway, same thing. DNS, they usually give it to you, and it's a different DNS. It's not the public Google one, but make sure the server's TCP/IP settings are correct. We said this one wasn't, so that wouldn't work. TCP/IP settings have been known to mysteriously change. Yes, that is true. Sometimes Windows gets a mind of its own, and I know some of you had this, where you had it set to the network, but it was giving you this really weird IP, like your network would have been 10.0.0.8. But it was giving you 127.98.22.5. Anything that starts in 127, I believe, and 192. So I think it was 192. It's been a while. I haven't seen it in a long time. That's why I'm saying that. Is an internal address. Windows just says, oh, crud, I can't find the IP. Here you go. I'm making myself one. I'm going to be the cool guy. I have an IP. I'm not going to worry about it. It's kind of a fail-safe in Windows where it just assigns itself something and calls it a day. So the most common situation is that the server's TCP/IP configuration is reset. That'll happen. Make sure the computer, a DHCP client, is reset to make dynamic host control protocol. Don't worry about it. In most cases, servers should have a static IP. That's why you have one. You may not notice a problem with a file or print server, but if your DNS server or domain controller configuration has changed, your clients will experience problems. So I know I had you make a DNS server. I'm not going to have to do much with it, unfortunately, because there just isn't enough time to configure it, configure your home router to see it, then everyone gets a DNS from it. Then you would have to undo it and send it back to the router. So that's why we didn't do that part. But I had to set one up so you can see what it's like to build one in terms of software. And the domain part of where was it? Domain controller, yeah. So if something goes wrong with your domain controller, its IP changes or it loses connection. Remember how I had to disable that account? That's it disabled. It would say unable to reach server, unable to reach server database. It would just give you this error. You're like, what in the hell? You're scratching your head. And sometimes you have an issue where computers fall off the domain. Why? I don't know. I've seen that too. What you do is you remove them from the domain and re-add them. However, I had you add them, you do the opposite. You take them off and you put them back on. And that's how they usually resolve that issue and it works. So let's move on to the next slide of troubleshooting here. Name resolution problems. That's DNS, essentially. What in a name? A great deal when computers communicate using names, which must be resolved to IP addresses. Remember, that's what DNS does. It takes the name and converts it to IP. If you have an apparent connectivity problem, always try pinging in their system by both name and IP. Yes, that is one of the most basic troubleshooting skills you can ever have. For printers, it's the same thing. It operates as the same function. If you're trying to reach, let's say, computer, we'll call him water 004. And water 004 controls the water plant's turbines. You ping it by its IP that you know. Doesn't come up. Host unreachable. Okay. You type in ping water, ping space water 004. Still can't reach it. At that point, you know you tried the IP that you knew it had. You can check it in your logs and see what IP it has. Or you can just try typing the name and it gives you IP, or what have you. You try to ping the name, you try to ping the IP, it's not responding, something's wrong with that machine. It's either it's unplugged, powered off, or the network cable's cut. One of those three, I guarantee it. So, if your server is out of touch, wanting to communicate by the host name, remember when I tried to do Active Directory and I could ping it with the IP, but I couldn't get the host name? Because the DNS was the issue. But can connect to other computers by IP, which I had. Check its DNS settings, WinS settings, and host/LM host files. You don't really edit those often. It's rare, so I wouldn't worry about those. The Win settings, those are also pretty rare. Mostly, again, it's DNS that's the issue. So that's what you need to look at. You resolve the domain name service. You can tell it to release it. You can do what's called a flush DNS command. It flushes it, and then it gets assigned a new IP to domain name service where it changes back and forth. So you can also troubleshoot from the top. Applications can cause the problems too. I've seen that happen a lot. The application that gets installed on the servers are different from the productivity applications that are typically installed on workstations. Yes, you don't install Office on a server. Let's face it. You install Photoshop on a server in terms of a server for work. Even licensing, that's a different animal. We don't get into it. Server applications tend to be those that allow you to manage, maintain, or monitor the server, such as disk utilities, Active Directory, network monitoring, or a sniffer program. I didn't talk about sniffers, but that's mostly Wireshark, where you capture packets so you can check where everything's going. Won't get into it. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm yawning so much. Oh Lord, I'm just tired of it. And that's what it means by sniffer packet or programs. That's something you'll get into more into networking and cybersecurity. We use those a lot to capture data and then play it back and figure out where and when, what it's doing, why is it behaving. That's what sniffers do. You just track things and follow things. Compatibility with the underlying operations of essential programs, such as Microsoft certified for Windows 2016 program, give you a way to, essentially what it's saying, advanced certification sticker with the server you're running. 2016 is technically out of date now. We don't use it anymore. For learning purposes, it's great because you can break it. There's a million bits of resources on how to fix it, how to do things with it. But like server 2019, 2020, 2022 R2, as long as they're certified, usually for 2019 and up, they're golden. You take a risk running an old version of software from like server 2008 on the 2020 server, you're asking for problems because it wasn't built for that. That's like a rated on NetFrame 2.5, which isn't even supported. I think the minimum now is 3.5, which I had to install, remember? and 4.5. And I think even 4.8 now is the newest one. And they can backtrack all the way down to 3.5 in terms of running applications and stuff for net framework. But anything beyond that, you're really rolling the dice. So, excuse me, guys. All right, let's move on here for more troubleshooting. I'm so sorry I'm yawning today. It's getting late. We still talk about maintenance. The paper chase. Troubleshooting print server problems. The source of printing problems can be any one of the following levels. The printer device attached to the print server computer. Configuration of the print server, which if you configure it right, you'll never have a problem. That's just a picture of the print server work. The physical connection between the printer and the server, or the server and the network. Yeah, believe it or not, sometimes network ports lose their configuration. And then they can't talk. You're like, what the hell? That's weird, but the printer's here. But then you check the printer, if you print out like a config page, excuse me, it'll give you a different IP address of our printers on the non-structural side, or 10.34.0. whatever. It might give you, the port changed and no one knew, and it's just being weird. It'll be like 10.42, and you're like, what the hell? 10.42 isn't right. That's 8 numbers, 8 to 7 numbers ahead of where your range should be from 34 to 35. That, the problem's the port. That's how you figure it out. Your first step of troubleshooting print server problems is to make sure that the print device is working. Yeah, you send a test page from the printer. Pretty easy. And make sure that the printing device is working and all connected. Connections are secure. Yeah, you physically check the machine. You go look at the printer. Check that the print spooler service is running. That's the problem sometimes too. The sprint spools of service. Let me pull it up. So if you go to the services, this is on my machine, but don't worry, it's not gonna break anything. I know I'm taking up the screen. Let me show you print spool. Print spool right here. This guy. I'm just stopping it. Sometimes it'll be stopped and it won't tell you. So you gotta either go to properties and go to automatic. Mine's stopped. I'm just gonna start it. Or sometimes it'll just completely frozen. That's where restarting the printer comes into play. You just restart it, everything has to reload automatically. It's automatic. Once it reloads, you're fine. And that usually solves it. So let me close this guy out. Checking the permissions set on the printer. Normally, that's part of the configuration. Once you set the permissions, again, you don't really need to change anything. If your network is a Windows 2016 or net domain, check group policy and settings for printers. Yeah, GPs can be kind of annoying with printers. Sometimes you can uncheck a box and GPS is disabled without paying attention, because group policies can get pretty dicey. In terms of configuration, they can get complex quickly. Oh, I'm so sorry. So that's for the print server. Pretty straightforward. Next one I'm going to talk about is email troubleshooting. That one, I'll be very brief on it because I don't really deal with mail exchange. That's a whole different kind of crazy, guys. I'm not going to really quiz you guys on it. It's just so you guys know about it. That's why it's in here. And I was trying to find, a picture of what configuration looks like for an email server, but they're mostly kept confidential because it's kind of a security risk. If you know email, you can break into it. So, and it's in the mail. Troubleshooting email server print problems, or server problems, print problems. So think about print servers. I am sorry. Email is the most used network application today. Problems with the mail server can be due to the same kind of problems I've discussed earlier. Hardware, yeah, hardware can make a mail server break. Kind of adds up, right? I only slept 3 hours. Okay, I'm being honest. TCP/IP settings. In addition, check the following: make sure the mail exchange, MX, resources, records, and your DNS entries are correct. So you go to your DNS and check to make sure that the mail exchange is properly pointed to where it has to point in terms of where it's recording, what's sending, what's in, and what's out. Make sure the mail server has plenty of disk space. This one is probably the main culprit. 99.9% of the time. You may need to impose limits on mailbox sizes. So the problem working at any organization, it can be public, this can be, I have my own desk, private, any one of those, is mailbox size. Oh, I'm sorry. You could set mailbox size up to what? Let's say 10 gigs. Every user has a 10 gig mailbox. Cool. What do you do about the users that send large files like pictures? Don't use FTP. They send pictures, they send announcements, they send bulletins, they send something's falling over here. They send documents. A little bit at a time ain't much. But if they do this over the course of years, and let's say they never check their email inbox, and it just grows and grows. Once you hit a certain number, about roughly 8,000 emails, and it's just attachment after attachment after attachment. Your mailbox refuses to load. Then they flip out. Why? They can't receive email. They can't send email. They still can, though, if they go to the web version of an email server, which you should have access to if you work there. You would be able to go to your email portal, like you go to Yahoo. Your internal one will be mail.mcc.edu, and you log in. And you can still work the email that way, but the client on the machine loses it. It doesn't know how to receive emails, doesn't do anything, because the mailbox, you essentially have, think of an old school mailbox, physical mail. It's stuffed to the point you can't push any more mail. How do you clean it? You go to the web server version and you empty out as much as you can. The problem is when you tell clients to do that, be them users, be them staff, be them anything, even presidents. And I'm talking like college presidents, CEOs, big wigs. Once they get to the point where it starts working, they stop cleaning it. And guess what you have again in about 3 weeks? The same dang problem. I can't get any mail. Why? Same process, rinse and repeat. And unfortunately, clearing up email is a very, very tedious thing for them and for you, because sometimes they don't want to do it. They want you to do it. So at that point, you kind of scratch your head and go like, I guess I can do it. And then you realize you shouldn't be doing it because there's a bunch of confidential information. And I don't mean confidential in terms of their personal life, work stuff. It could be HR audits. It could be finance records, things you shouldn't be really seeing in sense of what's on their computer in that, or box in that aspect. You might see a draft of it. You're like, oh man, that's how much we're getting. Then it turns out less. Like, that's why you don't want to do that. If you want your mail server to receive mail from other mail servers, make sure that your mail server is configured to enable relay. Otherwise, the request will get blocked. Yeah, that's just a common setting that you do when you set it up. So next one's terminal. Terminal is different from remote, and I'll explain that in a second. So terminal service, this is a Linux one I was able to actually find. That was configured on a Windows 2000 server. This is a screenshot. So terminal condition troubleshooting terminal service problems. The thin client solution is becoming more and more popular now. What does that mean? So you essentially can go walk up to any screen, keyboard, and mouse, and it's like a basic computer. It's nothing, hot rod, powerful. Now it's this basic machine with like 8 gigs of RAM. And let's say, sorry, i5. That's enough power to get through a day with 256 gigs of an SSD. Really basic machine for work. When you log into the domain, if this is configured in the machine, it will point to the server. That's called a node. You're not logging in to that station. You're logging into the terminal, which points to the server. Does that make sense? That's what's referring to a terminal. Remote connection is different. That's where you're connecting to the actual machine. That's the next slide, though. Windows 2016 should say server. I'm lazy, and I put Windows. /.net domain. Check group policy, individual users, accounts, properties, and active directories, as you do. The user are unable to connect to the terminal server or are unexpectedly disconnected. So sometimes what winds up happening is you're connected, let's say, from one node to the server for you to use it. Someone else will come on and kick you off. That's essentially what happens. Check the terminal service configuration settings, start, programs, administrative tools, tells you where to go. Make sure that the terminal service is running. Yeah, sometimes that service kind of bugs out and stops in application mode. You gotta make sure it's application mode all the time. That's how it runs. Otherwise, only administrators can connect. It's true. If it's not running application mode, nobody else can connect but you as an admin. You can only have 2 active sessions at a time. That's the point. So if you're on, another admin gets on. Cool. Third admin? No, sir. One of you is getting kicked off. Make sure you have set up terminal service license server and that you have sufficient licenses. That's another one people don't take into account. These use licenses, Windows license kind, and they're volumed up to a specific amount. Let's say you have 200 users that can remote, or not remote. I keep saying remote and terminal a lot because I can't interchange them a lot of work. Let's say you have 200 terminal service clients all over work. You hired another 50 people. How are you accommodating 50 people when your license only goes up to 200? You need to buy 500. You need to buy 50 more licenses. That'll just meet what you need. So you may want to buy 100 so you have spares in case more people get onboarded. So there's things like that you have to take into account when setting up these services. A remote connection, which is the next one. Yeah, that was a little bit easier to troubleshoot than this. This is a little, It's mostly do a configuration and licensing essentially. You have the licenses, great. Sometimes the configuration goes wonky and you got to restart the service. So let's talk about remote access server problems. Remember, So you tried remoting in and you couldn't get in because you were typing in /admin or whatever you had for your account. Sometimes it comes on just basic stuff like that. Don't feel bad. It's common. A remote access server allows clients to dial in. Should get rid of dial in and just switch to connect. Which I'll make a note of that on slide 30. Sorry. These were some slides I remembered I had, and they kind of fit in the sense of where we needed them. This is back from the day when they would dial into remote. Now you just connect. The cyber connection through a VPN. You guys have seen how that works over the internet. If clients are unable to connect to your remote access server, check the general connectivity issues mentioned earlier, which is make sure remote access servers are installed, and configured on your server. That's pretty easy to do. Make sure your PPT and L2 ports, which it's port 88 and I think 58 or 55, are enabled to accept inbound remote access calls. Those are normally set up no matter what, believe it or not. Those are usually ready to go. You just got to enable them in terms of opening from what time to what time. Make sure that the remote access server is configured to allow connections to the protocols that are being used by the remote clients, IP, IPX, AppleTalk, or NetBEUI. NetBEUI got retired ages ago, but it's just in there because it's kind of used in some old hardware still. But the other thing that people don't mention remote connection that I have seen is the user machine. And I'm not talking about your server. Your server just handles the connection coming to it, then you point to the machine where it goes. So you're just like going, you're handing it off, network, server, okay, cool. Here's the computer. Kind of like how the old telephone operators would plug in. It's kind of like that. That's how it goes when you connect to another machine through a server. But the server, if you set it up properly, you won't run into any of the things that are listed here. Usually it'll be the client machine. Either the client machine died, which I have seen, client machine is off, client machine hard drive's dying, or the client machine is disconnected from the network. Those are the four things you usually see with remote more than anything. Server, not that often. There's about 9 more slides, guys, so we're almost there. So after you've done all this troubleshooting, you started from the middle, you started from the top, you looked at applications, looked at configuration. You are, for lack of better terms, stressed out, tired, and annoyed, and you want to go to lunch. What do? Look at the less obvious. A good philosophy for troubleshooting server problems is the adage, when you hear hoofbeats, expect horses, not zebras. In other words, so you've thought of all the common stuff. What else can you consider? It's usually boils down to hardware failure, misconfigurations, and network settings. The exotic ones are so rare, guys. They're less than 3% would be my argument that something exotic is broken. Usually those don't break. It's usually just the real basic stuff. And that's what most people, and I'm not saying to this tell anybody, don't seem to understand when the server breaks. It's like, oh, the hard drive died. Cool, have a backup and restore it. It takes 4 hours. Or what's another one? Power supply died. Even though you have a UPS, if power supply dies, even on your tower, your personal one, or your laptop, your battery's fried. What do? Replace the laptop or replace the battery. Okay. So what happens when you checked it and you're all the usual suspects? What do? Then you may want to consider some less common possible things. Check your server security settings. Domain security settings, policies. Make sure it's all in place. Because sometimes a malicious actor, a third-party actor you don't know about, can gain access. If you're curious about that, there was a water plant in, I believe it was Florida. I want to say Tallahassee, Florida to be exact. I don't recall. You can Google it. Be my guest. I'm going a little bit off topic, but it has to do with security. They would use a program called TeamViewer. What's that? It allows you to connect to any PC you need to work on or what have you and troubleshoot. It's just a piece of software. And someone left, or rather set up a setting on it that says, uncheck here if you want to leave unattended access. Someone figured out the password and username to that machine and connected to it. And they almost had this machine perform a dump action. Now I mean dump in terms of the program. It almost dumped this machine, sorry, I should give you a little more context, was in charge of purifying the water for the city. They almost had to dump more chlorine or something. It would have made it not toxic, but more acidic. And the only reason they caught it is because literally, I'm putting my mouse on the screen. Normally, when you have your computer attending, your mouse sits there, right? The admin working that day saw the mouse do this. I bring the mouse back. Moved by itself. And here's the thing. It was him and 3 other admins, or 2 other admins. He knew the other 2 admins didn't start till mid-shift and night shift. So why would someone be using that machine? You know what he did? Right over there, unplugged it. Immediately unplugged it. And then cut the network off from the outside and declared an emergency. This is all part of backup and securing, what we're going to talk about in the last chapter, which should be a little more fun. And you guys was kind of see me rant a little more. I'm so sorry. You guys have lived the fighting some ranting. Anyways, check client licenses, license settings. Yeah, licensing is pretty common. Your server is configured to use pre-selected licenses. I already talked about this, guys. If you have 100 licenses and you had 100 more people, then tell you can't accommodate everybody, you gotta get more. That's what that's saying. Always consider that the server itself is not at fault. We have talked about this. When it's the print server, sometimes even the print server is fine. It's not the print server's fault that you can't print. The printer just died and melted or is on its last legs. That's essentially what it's saying there. So let's get into maintenance. This is going to be about 9 slides worth of maintenance. I'm just going to go kind of breeze through them quickly. It won't be too much. So let's move on. But right before that, let me pause this, even though I just switched the slide, and get some water. So the reason I put this at the end was because this ties us in to Unit 6, which is troubleshooting is done. Okay, but this is in terms of backing up, disaster recovery, and security. That's why the importance of backing up. It's kind of goes hand in hand with maintenance. It kind of goes together. This should actually say maintenance, but it's okay. This is just segueing into it. So you're going into troubleshooting and going to maintenance. You know how important it is to always have a current backup of your mission critical data, but do you actually practice what you all preach? When was the last time any of us performed a data backup? I'll be honest with you, I haven't performed one in years. You know why? Because this is not dumb. All my important stuff, I keep on a cloud, my own personal private cloud, no one has access to but me. So all my data that's in terms of resumes, personal files, any file that doesn't need to get accessed by other than me is tucked away. So I could lose my movies, I could lose my music, I could lose my games. It's okay. Steam has all my game library. Blizzard has all my game library that I haven't used in 3 years. Ubisoft, etc. Whoever. All my game library is there and then syncs my saves. I'm not worried about it. Pictures, I don't have any real important pictures on my machine. Music will probably be the biggest one that hurt because this music collection I built over the course of years. My point is, how often do you guys back up? It's just a question. You can tell me if you want. You don't have to. It's just curiosity. Me, I'll perform music backup eventually. There's no space in my cloud to store it. I'm just haven't gone around to it. If not, you may want to find out before you actually need it. Though the reason being, it's telling you, or rather, the slides kind of saying, when was the last time you did it? Why I'm talking about it is sometimes, and it's always during the most crucial times, things fail. Doesn't matter what it is. Car can break down. You need to get to school for a midterm, a final, register, whatever. You need to take your cousin to the airport. Blew a tire. Battery died. Just going by car because it's just easier to explain the example. No matter what, things fail, and that's the problem. That's why you need a backup. Power to the server. The importance of a good UPS. Remember I talked about that? Why we want one? So the server can keep running, so you can still go and shut it down. Power surges. Those still happen in this day and age. Outages. That's a big one. Can be responsible for all managed mysterious glitches. Even if your server appears to have survived intact, it's crucial to protect your server with a good uninterrupted power supply to prevent this. A UPS. Don't worry, you're going to have an exercise on building up 2 server rooms. Don't worry, it won't be nuts. I'll make it easy-ish. And then good to go. Using VM software to mirror server configuration. That is kind of true in terms of maintenance, but it's also true in terms of testing. So you can copy your server, make an image of it, deploy it into a virtual server, and then you can mess around with it to your heart's content. Remember, if your VM wasn't working, you can just delete it and make a new one. That's the point of having VMs. That's kind of the fourth form that I forgot. No, I didn't mention. Sorry. I'm recording like 30 minutes later. My brain's kind of foggy. So the ultimate disaster protection is server clustering. Create an exact duplicate of your servers on a second machine, which can instantly take over. Yep. So a cluster, the benefit of a cluster is they're all going to have copies of the server, right? So server 1 melts. Server 2 isn't responding because it was whatever, connected a certain way to server 1 so it work. Server 3 is like, my time to shine, kids. Let's go. Server 3 will load everything where it took off from the last backup. It could have been a week ago. It could have been 3 days ago. You're up and running. You're still in the game. That's the beautiful thing about clusters, which I talked about way in the beginning. Which can easily take over, which I just mentioned, over the duties of your failed service that your users experience little to no interruption in network services. So when a cluster machine comes up, it takes about 10 minutes, depending on the hardware and software configurations and drive configurations. 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes even half an hour. Just tell them, hey, we're having an issue with just the network. Just make a general announcement in email if it's still working, or run by and knock on doors and tell people. because your server could be mail server could be separated. Email them, hey, give us 30 minutes, we're bringing the server back up, and that's it. They don't need to know the details. The easier the better. The more details you give, sometimes the more questions you get asked, and it can get again complex, and you don't want to confuse people with giant nerdy words. Well, the RAID server died because the parley bar A, B, and C and D, and the people will look at you like you're speaking Greek. You don't want that. You just tell them, hey, we're having a server issue, we're fixing it, it should be up to 30 minutes. With that, people are content. Sometimes it goes over 3 minutes and they start asking you, what's going on? Putting on the finishing touches, man. You test it, you're on, cool. And then make the email. You can connect that, go for it. And that's it. Then you can go back to your day and figure out what happened with those two clusters, 1 and 2, and fix it and build them and on with life, handle everything else. So let's talk about server maintenance. I didn't switch. I feel like a mook. Okay, so server maintenance is the process of keeping the server software up to date, Windows updates, and running smoothly so that a computer network can function properly and avoid downtime or loss of data. Backups, remember? Regular server maintenance will keep the server running as expected and will help avoid a total or particular network failure. Yeah, that's true. As long as you keep it with the maintenance on the server, you're fine. They only fail when hardware fails at that point, usually, which is like what? 25%, 20% chance usually the hardware fails after like 5 years. Failure rates aren't that high on servers, believe it or not. It indicates tasks like reviewing the server's performance. That's where you clone it and stress test it. You can do that. Ensuring the automated system monitoring utilities are properly installed and configured. Event viewer, stuff like that. You can add different kinds of things to monitor heat, monitor usage, monitor bandwidth. You can install all those kinds of things. I might do something like that down the line. I'll think about it. Identify potential security risks. This is where group policy comes into place. This is where teaching people not to click on suspicious links to get ransomware, stuff like that. That's part of security. 90% of security attacks now are what's called social engineering, coupled with insider. What do I mean by insider? Let's say you're a junior server admin, so you're below the server admin, right? You're the guy under him. You're his go-to guy for everything in between. That has to do with configuration, adding users, mundane stuff technically, right? At this point, because you guys have done it. And unlock the accounts. Okay, let's say you're in charge of all that. Let's say he quits. Cool, that spot's open. I'm going to apply. You apply. Go through the rigor, get it interviewed and all that. Then you hear back 2 weeks later, handshake. Hey, thanks. But you felt like that was owed to you because you worked under the guy. He put in good work for you, did everything. They didn't give you the spot. Let's say you're upset. See where I'm going with this? You're upset, so you can do something where you disable all the safeguards. That's called an insider attack. You enable a vulnerability. That's something I'll get into with security, but that's an example of security risk that most people kind of don't consider. Nobody one considers, the hacker. The hacker isn't the hacker like you see in movies where they use JavaScript to say hacking NASA 10%, 15%. No. The hacker is more of the social engineer where they cold call people or send emails. It's called spear phishing. Where they target people who they know they aren't too computer savvy. And I'm not going to mention anyone by name or age, or not just someone just isn't that good at computers and barely can, pitter patter the way around. Oh, this email says it's from IT. They need me to update my password by email. I'll send it. Once they have that, they can get access to network and resources. Yada, yada. And backing up on regular intervals. Normally, server backups happen once a week. Believe it or not. It's not every day. It just takes too much time sometimes. So if you schedule it for like a Sunday when no one's there, same way they interrupt it, almost power going out or an act of God like a flood, you'll be fine. That's why it states that. So here's a server maintenance plan. It covers a lot of things. What's covered? Server maintenance plan generally requires the following: checking server logs, event viewer, logons, what's the other one? Security logs, all kinds of logs, millions of logs. Assessing hard drive space, how much storage you're using now, month to month. Let's say it's 10 terabytes. You're up to 5 terabytes in the span of a year. Cool. Can you make the other 5 terabytes last, or do you add another drive just popping it in? That's another 10 terabytes. You expand it. Things like that. Examining folder permissions. Yeah, from time to time, you'll have to check. Departments change their requirements of, hey, we don't need to get access to this much data. We need to access the report from 3 years ago. So anything from like 2020 to 2021, remove the access. There you go. It goes away. That data you would archive in a backup, like really archive it. You won't ever need it, so you're free up space. Monitoring network temperature applications. What's that mean? So the server can monitor all your switches if they're plugged into the network and configure them to report back, hey, I'm at this temperature. Hey, I'm at that temperature. And you can set up settings where alarms go off, and then many alarms are going to give you an alert like, hey, this network switch is at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not good. Replace it, update it, reconfigure it. Yeah. It's just that kind of thing. That's what it means by network temperature applications. Ensuing an adequate redundancy of systems, a backup of the backup, essentially. Make sure you have applications in place, you have a cluster, you're good. Examining security features, which I kind of touched on. GPOs are in place, logins are in place. Do passwords expire every 3 months, every 3 weeks? Do you just need to change their password? They can't use the same password again. Things like that. That's that kind of security. Installing security software patches, service packs from Microsoft, anything else that's put out as a hot fix with security to patch things out, things like that. Reading server logs for security alerts. Yeah, you would review those. You would review those once a month at most, at least, not most. At most, twice, 3 times a month. You can have people dedicated to just going line by line, like, oh, event 40 showed someone tried to log in from this IP that's not our IP, and then you can track the IP. That's where computer hacking attempts come in. But that's where you would review your emails for junk and stuff getting through, and you can set up your firewall to catch it, delete it, all kinds of things. Updating your antivirus software on all computers on network. That's a big one that you can do automated. You don't have to worry about it too much, but you can make sure the automated task is running every week because it spits out a log for it, right? It does something, so it tells you, and there's a log of it recorded. Remember, I had to go through Event Viewer and it posted all those things? That's what I was referring to when I'm going to logs. Or like antivirus will say, hey, remember you tried to access this resource, here's the ticket, or here's the ticket, here's the time it happened, here's who did it, yeah. Updating critical service packs, yeah, that goes hand in hand with security features. That's part of it. Performing regular cohesive backups. Backup once a week. In case of a massive failure, you have your backup. We'll cover more of this in the next chapter. This is just a brief overview of it, okay? Did I double this slide? I did. I am so sorry, guys. Let me delete this slide. So you've seen it. Same thing I just mentioned. So moving on. So here are a couple of ways that you have your steps to success. It's about 10 of them. Verify your backups are working. So you can create a backup, which we will do. I'll use it for the next one because it kind of goes more hand in hand with it. Create a backup. You have a virtual machine. Copy that backup into the virtual server machine. I can't say machine, it means server. Copy it and tell it, hey, machine, you're cool. Can you restore from this one restore I just created? And if it successfully works and restores it to that point, like the day prior or 3 days prior having, congratulations, it worked. Your backup's good. Pretty simple. Checking disk space, usage, we talked about this, and it tells you a little more detail how you can keep it clean. Delete old email logs. Yeah, after like about 6 months, you can kind of prune it. Small data if it means faster recovery. Keep an eye on your disk usage. If your usage is 100%, your server may stop working. Yeah. So when you cap out, your server is like a bottle of water that's full. You're trying to pour more water, and it's going to just overflow. You lose, things get lost, corrupted, erased, missing. You don't know what's going on. That's why you always got to be top of space and always allocate more space aside. So you just plug in a SCSI drive. Hasta la vista, baby. You're good to go. Monitor RAID alarms. It's going to be running in some kind of RAID, right? 0, 10 mostly. And a single hardware failure could cause complete system failure. Kinda. Just depends on the RAID at that point. Which, if you're running RAID 10, a single disk is not going to melt. But you would have to, if you hear laughing, I do apologize. People seem to forget I'm recording. If at that point you'd have to recreate the RAID, you would keep the server offline for maintenance window. You set up maintenance windows down the line. Normally, maintenance windows are done after hours, where they have to pay you more dinero because it's overtime, and who doesn't like extra money? But if you had plans on a Friday night to go to the movie with your friends and you're working, I'm sorry, but you're making more money than most people at that point being paid overtime. That's just a very crude example. It's the idea. Anyway, always update your OS. Yeah, if you're using Linux, because it's always frequently updated, dude, Linux is updated what feels like daily. You just run a command and it gets it. Linux is a lot more manual though, where you have to literally type the command to do it, versus Windows you click on update. I say Windows in terms of server and Windows 10, and I lump Windows and server kind of all to the same boat because they're kind of the same system, just server has more bells and whistles. You guys should know that by now. To work on this problem, you can automate patch management tool. You can have a tool that does it for you, monitors and reports to you email-wise, remote-wise, whatever. You can do that if you wanted to, or you can just be in charge of it and do it manually, but sometimes time constraints don't allow it, so you use the patch management tool. Keep in mind that if you're updating your server manually, you may miss important security. That's kind of true. Oh, they'll put out security bulletins like every week, and if it's big enough, you'll notice you need to get it. That's where managing with the management tool comes into play. Tell it, hey, if it's critical beyond a certain threshold, grab it, grabs it, installs it, good to go. Normally, though, you don't patch immediately. I know it sounds weird, even though I'm saying you got to do it. You test it, because what happens if you deploy a patch and it breaks something and you can't undo the patch? So you roll back your server or restore your server to like 3 weeks ago, a week ago. You're missing whatever data from the week and it's lost forever. So you clone the server, patch that server, leave it running for 3 days to a week to see how it behaves. And if it behaves okay, nothing melts or breaks, cool. Then you put the patch out. Patching isn't always instantly. It's just when I say it, it sounds like it, but no. On the regular machines, that's different. You can install security updates to your heart's content, and if you break something, oh well, there's a system restore point. And the server, kind of, but it doesn't work that well unless it's really configured well, which I'm not going to have you guys do, but we'll talk about that more in the next unit. You cannot automate your updates, then create a schedule to update your system. That's why you just check weekly update. This is preventing your system from hacks. To an extent, yeah, but if you have a strong policy or firewall in place that's configured, I mean, you're not bulletproof. It's still going to happen eventually if someone clicks something that they shouldn't click on, or do something they shouldn't look, or do something they shouldn't be doing, or be looking at material they shouldn't be looking at, which I won't name. I won't get into it. Don't want to talk about that stuff. That's not why we're here. Update your controller panel. We're using hosting cPanel, which is kind of an older version control panel, but it's still relevant for those bare bones servers. Remember the ones that had you. So we're not doing that. Don't pick that one. This will make your system up to date and fix any known issues related to host. And continue. Step 6, check application updates. Yeah, a lot of the software you're running will need updates, especially WordPress or WordPress. That's mostly used for websites that are being hosted. That gets patched a lot through their end. You just download, install it, ready to run. Check remote management tool. Maintain your remote server via remote console, remote reboot, remote reschedule mode. Use essential tools for remote server management. So just reboot the service on the weekends when you do the reboot. Just tell it to do that too. Check it off. And then that solves that headache. So it's pretty easy. Hardware, you kind of got to go fishing for. In the event, you remember I had you check if you found any. That's where you kind of start reviewing the logs, and it will tell you you can make that task where your entire team does it all together. Did I go to the next one? Oh yeah, I did. Oh god, I wasn't done. Sorry guys, my finger slipped on my keyboard. But I was talking about hardware, and like I was saying, just you guys can check it. Like have the new guy, like, hey dude, it's your turn. Go through this log for the next 2 hours. If you find anything, tell me. Hour or whatever. Cool. You just look for the icons that give the errors. You don't want to go line by line. You kind of learn what to look for as time goes on. So now we're on to the last slide. So check server utilization. Check how much CPU and RAM is being used by the network at all. Not all times, but check on it. If it's too high, increase your memory. CPU might be able to upgrade it depending on what it is. But like that Dell server I talked about in the beginning of this lecture, which is Loopy Part 2, that has 2 processors. So there's no way in hell they're all going to be used up at the same time. It's super rare. Maybe during a backup, they'll use 90% of each, but that's rare. Review user accounts. This is where you talk about onboarding, offboarding, letting go of people. Some people change job positions in the company. They leave, they retire. You turn them off, sunset them, add new people, put them into different user groups, that kind of thing. Possibility storing old sites and users is both secure and legal risk. Yeah, because you're going to become in charge of their data. So what most companies do, and I'm not talking about where I work, just in general, they'll keep your data for up to a year and your login credentials. In case you come back or you need to grab something, that's what's there. But after a year, they prune it completely after everyone made sure, and this is like a whole team effort and department effort. So if you were in or accounting and you left and everything you worked on is backed up, but everyone else has a copy, and they made sure when they verified they have a copy a year later or 3 months later, and they know you're not coming back, erased, gone. You don't need it anymore because everybody else has copies. Because there's copies of the copy of the copy. So you're good. And they're changing passwords, 6 to 12 months especially. Yeah, it's kind of a little out of date in terms of 6 to 12 months. Now it's every 3 months is the window, and gotta make it complex. And don't give out your passwords to other people. I wouldn't give out my admin password to you guys, not because I don't trust you, but you don't need it. It's work related, like my super secret password kind of thing. You don't need it. And check your security logs. Use a remote auditing tool. This you can kind of hire a team. You can try to hack you, but they're getting paid, and they're not going to break anything. Once they break in, they will tell you, or they tell you, "Hey, we can't." And they try a bunch of different methods, which I'll talk more about in security. All right, guys, that is it. This is all for Unit 5's lecture. You have made it. Next week is week 6, and that is the end, unfortunately, of a server. I will give you a farewell message in Unit 6, don't worry. But I am going to say this now. I have had fun. It has been fun having you guys, even though I know we don't interact much unless you're on Discord or you message me, but it's been a pleasure so far. Other thing I have to mention is some of you have asked, what else am I teaching? I will be teaching digital forensics. It sounds like, put on white gloves and dust the hard drive for fingerprints. No, it's not that kind of animal. Similar vein though, but it's a newer science. But it's cool. I'm still figuring out what we're going to do for that in about a month's time. But if you're interested, it's CTIS, I believe, 22. It'll be a 6-week course. It'll be ran similar to this. We'll record lectures and we'll talk about it. It'll be a lot more theoretical stuff, I'll admit. It'll be a lot more written exercises in terms of, you're approached by this. How does this work? Why would you do it this way versus this way? It'll be stuff like that. There'll be some labs I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to make it free as well. I don't want you guys to pay because if I can set this up and you guys can break things for fun, why not? Break things in the sense of this is broken. Who broke it? Why was it broken? Stuff like that. Anyways, have a good evening, guys, or morning, whatever time you're watching this. I know some of you watch this at different hours, which is okay. Till then, I will catch you later, and I'll see you in the labs. Or lab.